Who has the first question? Yes, Jeremiah.
Most of the criticism I've heard people make about Rushdoony has been I guess people have an idea that he advocated reform through like social revolution, and I've only read a little bit of his writings, and I mean I don't get that at all. I kind of get, I think he advocated reform through prayer and teaching, education. So what is it that causes people to have that misconception?
I want to argue that, I answer that by saying just flat out hatred. He called people to responsibility, and he also attacked their he attacked their bases. I mean, I'm gonna, John, can I put you on the spot here? Sure. Since I already have. Who was it that was telling me? Was it you that was telling me about a young man who wanted to be a pastor, and he talked to a pastor that he really respected? No, that was Pastor Weaver. Sorry, John. Sorry, it was Pastor Weaver.
Did you get him on the phone?
No, we don't have to do that. Told us a story about a young man that he knew, and thought at some point that he wanted to be a pastor. And he went to a pastor that he would spend some time fishing with at times and spend time with. Nothing wrong with that. And he asked the pastor, he said, should I go into the ministry? And the pastor said, Pastor John Weaver told us this just last week. The pastor said this, he said, it's a really good job. He said, everybody likes you. You make a good living. You don't have to do any work. People like that are going to hate Rushdoony. I can tell you. They're going to hate his guts. And, and another thing, too, is that we know in Christian circles today what makes money. What really makes money is books on prophecy, right? Prophecy conferences. All you need to do is look at the Left Behind series, right? It's a moneymaker.
Fear.
And Rushdoony really challenged that stuff with his long-term view. And he's really, really hated for it. There's a lot more that can be said, but just one more thing to say about that, Jeremiah, and that is this. I think he's hated because he actually had solutions. I honestly believe that. I think, for the most part, I think a good word is churchmen. I don't want to say pastors necessarily, but I'm talking about theologians, I'm talking about seminary people. They're better off without solutions, because now you can argue about it. Now you can be inclusive. Now you can make the big tent, and then we can all sit in the big tent. We can all discuss, and we can all go back and forth with our ideas. And again, Rushdoony was more about kicking people out of the tent than inviting them in. Not a real likable guy, as far as they were concerned. It kind of reminds you of the Old Testament prophets a little bit. Yes, John. Pastor John.
Are you familiar with his position on something I believe is a problem in the churches today in America? They do not realize that they have immunity from any government interference regarding their freedom of assembly and the worship.
I know that he and his son-in-law argued about that point, as others. But I'm not familiar with his, shall we say, his thought opposite. Is that in one of his books, perhaps?
I don't know, I'm asking.
Okay.
Because I believe that that's the problem with the church in America.
Yeah, well, I know his position on the church, the family, and state is that the state has no jurisdiction over the church whatsoever.
We're immune.
Yeah, right, and he has argued immunity. And I have seen him argue that tax immunity versus tax exemption. He didn't like exemption because he said the state grants exemption.
You have to be a creature of the state in order to qualify for exemption.
His term was immune. They can't grant exemption. His issue was if they grant exemption, then you're then they have jurisdiction over you.
It originates before that.
Right. He
when the
argued,
church becomes a creature of the state, then it submits its application for exemption.
yeah, and I'm
The
trying
point
to,
is not to be a creature of the state.
right. John, I'm trying to remember where I read that in his. He was the first one to me, though. I never read his, shall we say it out in a chapter after chapter, but he was the one to introduce the term immunity to me. I had not read that before I read that. Yeah. Yes, Randy.
You mentioned he came in on the scene in the 60s,
Yes.
and he died in 2001.
Yes.
Do you see anybody in the picture now of that caliber?
Not of that caliber, not by a long shot, I don't. I'm not so sure if that's not a good, I'm not so sure that's such a bad thing. Because it seems like now there's a lot of very small people. If I could say so myself, sort of small and smaller. And, you know, he's influenced a lot of people that I think are working it out. Because I think it's harder to ignore the smaller people than it was him. Because when he was writing his books, he was so ignored. I mean, they just didn't pay him any attention except to laugh at him. But now there's a lot of people that are arguing it out on Facebook, if you will, on online forums, writing books and arguing it. And I think they're making their case. And I think it's more effective now than it was before. Because, and again, I ran into a pastor one time who said, you know, he said, I never really liked the idea of God's law, theonomy, and so forth. He said, but I realized one thing. There was a pastor, I only met him one time. He had married someone who had been in my youth group, and when I was a youth pastor. And he said, you know what? He said, I realized, though, that the people that are arguing against the theonomists and the Rushdoony types don't have any solutions. He realized that on his own. They have no solutions whatsoever. He said, you know what? He said, it makes me very sympathetic towards that position, towards a theonomic position. And if you've ever argued these things, I know most of you in here have. One of the things you find out when you argue this is if you reject God's law, you are solutionless. I know you've experienced that. No solution whatsoever. You hear horrible solutions like, well, put them in jail for life. Great. That's just terrific. Pay $35,000, $40,000 a year for all of our lives now. Yes?
I'd like to make a comment. You said that there was Rushdoony advocated or promoted social unrest.
Or the revolution.
Revolution?
Or the people say that he did.
Say that he did.
Yeah.
And I think you added the Christian element says that, or implies that. When you do that, that makes it very, very easy for the person that's saying that. He has put up a defense right around him all of a sudden. You're a bad guy. You're telling me to do something that's evil. So therefore, I don't really have to do anything to acknowledge what you just said, or to say that it's valid. It's very easy to do when you're in a discussion or a debate. If you would say something to me and say, and all of a sudden I would say to you, well, that's not right, that's evil, that's nonsense.
Bigoted. Bigoted.
Bigoted, yeah. You're mean-spirited. I got that already in my life, so I know what that does to somebody. It's very easy to put the Christian community at ease with themselves because they say, you are mean-spirited, pointing at me. I must tell you this. That happened to me about a year after I came to the faith, and I came to the faith late in life, and believed in Jesus Christ. And a Christian said that to me. You were mean-spirited, Randy. You don't know how that put everything at bay for the last 25 years. That's an easy element to do. That's what's happening in the Christian community. The leaders that do step out, and I'll tell you one thing, the internet has made it easier for that not to happen because when you verbalize over the internet, you don't see the whites of their eye. When him and I, and it was a man, were speaking, I was looking at the whites of his eye, and he was looking at mine.
They attacked the man and not the issue.
Well, he attacked, it was.
They attacked you and not the issue.
Yes, absolutely. And being young in the faith and really not knowing anything, I didn't even have a Bible in my house when I came into faith. And Joe knows about, you know, but that kind of an element, and I can imagine what Rushdoony must have been going through for his years. He must have been hell on. He must have gone through some real put-downs, emotional put-downs. God was strong, absolutely strong.
Even in the 1960s, when he wrote about homosexuality, he got flack from the Christian community. John.
Also, to Jeremiah's point, I think that Rushdoony's teaching that there were separate spheres of legitimate authority and that they were coordinate and not subordinate to the state is a revolutionary idea. And people will see that, people who are statists, who believe that the state is the superior, will see that as revolutionary. That's a revolutionary idea. And so, in a sense, he was preaching revolution, but revolution from bad ideas.
Yes.
What was his relationship with Van Til?
He was heavily influenced by Van Til. Cornelius Van Til was a philosopher at Westminster, a take no prisoners, nasty type guy, not a big tent guy at all.
He was the guy that pushed pre.
And what? And what Van Til did, he certainly introduced presuppositionalism into the Christian community. But what he did was let's just say it this way. He made the point that in every argument or every discussion, people bring a given to the discussion. In other words, something that's true that can't be questioned. Everybody brings that to the table. And so his whole idea was you expose their given. If their given isn't based on the scriptures, your job is to expose that given. Do you understand what I mean by the given? Do you understand that? What is accepted as true?
The implied argument, the implied premise is often not stated. It's called, in logic, it's called the enthymeme.
What is it called?
The enthymeme. It's a syllogism without a premise, and you have to figure it out. You got to figure out what the opposing guy really thinks. What drives him. You identify that.
Yeah.
Enthymeme.
And Van Til did that because what he said was an unbeliever, an anti-Christian, his whole goal is to destroy God and anything that looks like God. And if you don't understand that when you're talking to him, you're going to ultimately be arguing on his premises and you're going to lose. That seriously influenced J Rushdoony because he came along and Van Til was in a he was a seminary professor. He was in the ivory tower. Rushdoony took it all out of the ivory tower and spread it all over every place else.
Joe, you might want to comment that Van Til was involved with Machen and some of the other guys starting up Westminster in Philadelphia. Machen and Van Til, that was the initial cadre that set the school up in the 30s.
Yes, in the 30s, Westminster came into being as a result of the reaction of the Presbyterian. I always get these mixed up. PCUSA. I always get these two mixed up. PCA. And the first one?
Yeah.
PCA. Okay, PCA. Which were basically, I mean, they were simply compromising and saying, you know what, we can mix the Word of God with the Word of man. And Machen especially wouldn't have anything to do with it. And neither would Van Til. As I studied like his life here, I said at the end of my talk that I don't know what the Christian landscape would look like if if he had never come along. And I think for my own self, I think I'd be some kind of a weird, kind of like sort of conservative Republican guy, you know, lesser of two evils, with no principle. And you know, I've been in politics. Randy knows. He was in politics with me. I ran for office. And one thing I found out fast Because those Republicans are every bit as without principle as those Democrats are. That I did learn. And I'm so grateful that someone came along. I'm so grateful for this, that someone came along to help me see through the fog. Because I think I'd still be in a fog. I believe that. Yes, Bob.
Just two things that you sort of mentioned about Van Til being mean and tough. Van Til as a person was not. He was one of the most gracious, funny, enjoyable. I knew Van Til, just like I knew Abraham Lincoln. I knew Van Til was a very gracious, incredible guy who would go out and evangelize with his students. He was just incredible and talk to you forever. Rushdoony too, because I was in the early part of the Christian school movement. Rushdoony was a critical witness in Christian school cases and homeschooling cases, but Christian school particularly. And what would happen is Gibbs and some of the others would bring him in as a witness, and he would lay out his argument. And of course, the prosecutors just love to say, "Well, Mr. Rushdoony, where in history or where in philosophy do you come up with these ideas?" Wrong thing to say to Rushdoony, because he would reach back and bring stuff up and scared the daylights out of the prosecutors and the legal system. And were it not for him, I'm not sure Christian education would have gotten the foothold that it did, nor homeschooling. He was just incredible, and he had a depth that never ended. And every prosecutor knew they were over their heads. Eventually, if you brought Rushdoony into the case, they were going to lose, and they just they knew it. So
I think you're right about that. The sad thing is now is that many Christian school leaders can't stand Rushdoony. They don't. They're standing on his shoulders and don't even know it.
yeah.
It's a sad thing, but it's reality. Yes, Ryan.
On a personal note, how well read would you say Rushdoony was?
Oh, good question. Yeah.
A book a day at least.
Yeah, his son told me that he pretty much read a book a day. Now, his son told me he didn't necessarily read every single word, but he could read it so that he could get the sense of the book. Pretty much read a book a day. To me, that's not the incredible part of it, though. The more incredible part is that he could remember what was in it. And if you read Rushdoony, man, he is quoting the most bizarre, I shouldn't say bizarre, but obscure sources sometimes. Books you've never heard of. You might be reading a book that was published in 1974, and he's quoting a book that was published in 1930. No, it's not even around anymore, but he had it in his library. And as far as a well-read man, I don't know if I know of any other man who's as well-read as he was. Not that could quote things like he could in his books. And I don't know who Stephen Hawking's reading.
You know who he's not reading.
Yeah, right. Colonize the moon. I mean, come on. Mars. Oh, my word. That's outrageous. People sitting around. It says more about them than him. I mean, I don't know. If I get people to believe me saying something like I might say it. I don't know. I might. Look at all the people nodding. This is fun. It's a fun time. Other questions? Well, thank you for your kind attention here, and I hope you go home tonight with a good book.
Hey, good.